All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to episode 2 of the As Brothers podcast. I'm Stobbie from 9, joined as usual with Bosco, and we've got ourselves a special guest, Hans Gruber. Hans, welcome.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, you're very, very welcome. So some of our viewers will be familiar with myself and with Bosco, but why don't you give us a few minutes to talk about, who you are, what you do as a streamer, and your involvement with Battle Brothers so far.
Okay. I am a variety streamer who has been focusing primarily on indie games and usually of the tactical variety, though I do dabble into some ARPGs every now and again. My two biggest games that I've played so far, streaming-wise, has been Grim Dawn and Battle Brothers. I have currently got pushing 600 hours in Battle Brothers for the early access, and I like doing very aggressive game styles on veteran difficulty.
Nice. I've checked out a little bit of your streams, and you're a hell of a lot better than I am. But then again, that's not saying much because I'm quite new and not all that good.
Yeah, I've probably got a couple more hours.
Yeah, man. But I'm trying to catch up because one of the things that struck me about Battle Brothers was I'm primarily an XCOM and a Dota player, but when I started playing Battle Brothers, I think I put 70 hours in like the first week and a half. It's freaking, this game is heroin. It's unbelievable. It's so good.
Yeah, when I picked it up, I think I sunk 90 hours into streaming in 7 days or something like that.
Craziness.
It's very addictive.
Oh yeah, that's wonderful. So that's the full release is very, very close. It's next week, Friday, is it? The 24th. I don't know what changes are planned, but it's just been a sec. I've just pulled up the latest beta update. It's 0.9.0.33 for the changelog, and quickly run through. I'll just read out here what changes have been made. First of all, it says here under changelog, change tiles at the very map border change tiles at the very map border in combat, which allows for a safe retreat without incurring any injury. Set the morale of characters to breaking as to make things less exploitable, which I think is a change they really had to make.
Yeah, it's a good shout. I think many people exploited the fact that you can sort of get into the corner. We discussed it even with the Necrosavants the last time. So maybe that's a cheeky peek from the devs, but no, I think it's definitely a good change, so that people will be less encouraged to use that strategy.
Yeah.
From what I heard of the forums is that a lot of the people that were playing Expert Iron Man were using that to minimize casualties. That being said, I actually never used it. I retreated, I think, twice, maybe in my anniversary run. And even then, it was mainly just because I ran into vampires early.
Yeah.
Oh, those vampires are absolute ball bags. I can't stand them. But I would, and I've said this before, while I had a troop of brothers getting cut to ribbons, I would rather fight legitimately and die than exploit the game mechanics. It kind of defeats the purpose of playing the whole game as far as
nonsense. Sick a couple of dogs and run the other direction.
But that actually raises something that made me think about my own mentality in playing the game. I absolutely hate the dogs getting hurt and killed because I'm such an animal lover, and I've just become a bit of a softie for it. But like the sound I have of the little audio cues of the dogs getting hit, it just really tugs on my heartstrings. And I don't know, man, I can't see myself releasing a whole bunch of dogs just to get cut to pieces.
Yeah, you'll like one of the later changes than in the latest patch notes for the donkeys.
Yeah, that was something that was brutal as well. I ran up to save a supply run getting attacked by some goblins, and you can just see the darkness. You can't hear them, and you just hear these poor donkeys getting stabbed by these nasty little green buggers. It's pretty brutal.
Oh no, what was even worse is in the Noble War, you have times where you have to attack supply carts, and it required you to slaughter all of the donkeys to finish the mission.
Oh my god, that's so brutal.
That felt bad, man.
You got Peter coming after you.
It's also really useless part of the battle. Like the donkey will not fight back. It's basically
and so unnecessary. Like just butchering this poor ass. Slay the ass. All right. So next one, fix an issue with potential save corruption. That's all just bug fixes, fix potential crashes, fix potential issues. So the rest of it all is just making the game run a bit smoother. So there must have been a few other gameplay changes from this last one. Am I forgetting anything? I'm just looking at the changelog, and all it's really showing is that bit about the...
That was a really minor change.
Yeah, it was a minor one.
I think
they just saw a couple of issues. They're trying to fix up the bug fixes before the release.
Which kind of makes sense. I had a brief poke around to see what is being done in terms of major changes for the release, and I haven't found anything. So I think the build is pretty much where they want it to be.
Yeah, the last big change was actually the last patch, the big one. Yeah. That was the last patch they were going to release before the before the game is officially released, and they were just going to be doing tweaks on it to make sure it's stable.
Yeah. Well, that sounds good. I mean, I quite like where the game is at right now, and just think back to a couple of patches ago before you had the double speed, before you had some of the quality of life things. Like, my God, how do we ever play the game without it? So I really like how many changes they're making and how quickly as well. The devs do seem to be really on the ball, and hope to get them on here at some point.
Especially if you take it into consideration how many games get early access and then get left behind. So it's really nice that I really, this is one of my favorite dev crew, because they put so many heart and effort into everything, and they listen to their fans. Like I've been emailing them last summer because I had some ideas and I wanted to help, and they were super nice, replied back. They were like, oh, thank you so much for your
that's awesome.
Support and all that sort of stuff. And they even got me like detailed answers to like, oh, we can't put this in the game, but would be cool, yeah. This is not a bad shout. We might take it into consideration and stuff like that. So it was a really detailed answer, not just like, a regular copy paste, like, thank you so much for playing our game. Your support is very appreciated.
It's a PR person who didn't play the game.
It was awesome. They are one of my favorite devs, if not the favorite devs.
Yeah, good on them. And speaking of questions, for those of you who are watching, if you have anything for us, just type in the chat right now and we'll be happy to address them as we go along. So, not much to cover in the patch notes, as we just said. The next item we wanted to discuss is early to mid-game tactics. So in episode 1, we covered some recommendations on day 0 to day 30, broad recommendations on how to get your battle brothers, together and prospering. So now I wanted us just to take a few minutes to discuss how you guys tend to approach the game when you approach early to mid, which is to say days 30 to days 60 to 70. What kind of tactics have you found successful? And I'll just get us started off by saying, normally I find myself around day 30 with 12 brothers. I've normally accomplished the visit every city ambition or the get 12 guys together, but normally I've had to get some guys who are pretty much dead weight, like, a couple of vagabonds or a few farmers who don't have good skills. And then around about day 30, I'm looking to save up a bit of money to hire what I consider the tier 2 classes, like militiamen, bastards, disowned nobles, even deserters have surprised me with how good they can be. And then I try to take that second month as, also fishing for more characters with stars in the skills that you want to really build your core 12 battle brothers with a few guys in reserve to switch out when need be.
For me, in that time period, it depends on what my first crisis is how I push differently on what I'm doing. So for me, if I'm going into a noble war to start with, which is what I've been doing lately, because I really like that crisis, in the day 30 to 60, I'm trying to find guys with a lot of fatigue so they can start wearing some mail into scale, because I usually like having at least 1 to 2 pieces of scale by the time I get into the noble war. And I try finding my second archer around then, and I don't buy the poachers, so I'm either looking for a very well-rolled Boyer or a decently rolled hunter.
Yeah.
And that can be pretty draining on the taxes, since the hunters are at a minimum $1,000.
Oh yeah, and just to remind all of us, the late game crises tend to hit around 80 to 90, isn't it?
They can trigger as early as day 55.
Oh wow. It's randomized, isn't it? I mean, it kind of depends.
I believe it's based on your reputation. Once you hit a certain threshold, you can trigger it at any time.
Yeah.
So if you're doing well early on, you'll get it triggered earlier.
Oh, that's interesting. So if you, like, on purpose, you don't get a lot of renown at the beginning, you can establish yourself stronger a little bit?
Yeah, but you're giving up the opportunity of getting the money from the missions.
Oh, yeah.
Because every single mission gives you the same money-wise. But yeah, if you didn't want to do, like, caravans or the cargo missions because they don't pay very well, and you just saved for like 2 Skull Bandit missions. Yeah.
That's interesting. I never thought about that, but that might be the case. Yeah.
Speaking of that, I've had quite some success with picking the ambitions that get me to become allied with a noble house as soon as possible, because I was quite surprised and wonderfully surprised to find out that if you get allied status with a noble house, you get a reinforced male hauberk and quite an impressive helm for free. You obviously want to be allied with them because they pay better, and as you become more popular with a particular faction, it just helps you get the money going a lot faster.
Yeah, the Heraldric Mail is actually an upscaled scale armor. It's the same fatigue for 10 more durability.
Yeah, that's something we can look at as well. So in terms of the armors, there's something that has been a touch controversial between myself and my viewers. Like very, very early on, I'll have all of my 6 shield bearers up front with a spear, a dagger, and then a secondary weapon. And then whenever I find a target that I can safely, quote-unquote, take down with daggers, a raider who's wearing a worn mail shirt, which is 110 armor for 10 fatigue, I'll always do so. And a lot of my viewers seem to suggest that they think it's a waste because I'm letting my troops get hurt and their armor getting damaged in trying to get that armor, and I should rather just use money to buy other types of mail in store. But I'm convinced that taking it off of, it's essentially a free set of armor, and it's cheaper to repair than it is to buy new.
To me, it's more coincidental. Like if I can, for example, someone attacks the wall, and I can put some arrows in his face, and he is struggling, I can just quickly, dagger him, and then hopefully it's done. But to actively wait it out seems a little bit of a risk.
It's a risk, yeah. Well, the thing is, I say that all with the caveat in terms of when it's reasonable to do so. And I've also started, like on my most recent playthrough with the evil guys, I've even kept 1 or 2 wooden sticks on a few guys. So if there's one guy that I see whose armor I want, but you've still got 5 or 6 other raiders to take care of, you just get one guy out with a wooden stick and just keep bashing him on the head just to keep him stun locked while you take care of his mates, and then you dagger him down.
Yeah, my greedy playstyle, I've recently adopted the daggers and flails method and just trying to take as much as I physically can. And it can pay off very well, but depending on the terrain that you're in, it can also be a huge liability.
Oh, yeah.
I got really greedy against a bandit raider who had a pike on the high ground.
Oh.
Yeah, I shouldn't have done that one.
And also, I've even found myself going to try to dagger. Was a bandit leader who was wearing this beautiful scale armor, and he had a winged mace as well. And then I had 2 brothers with maces, each with like 80% chance to hit, and they missed all 4. Wow. And then this guy just casually takes down 2 of those brothers in one turn. It was unbelievable. 2 headshots, their heads just exploded. But that's a risk you take, isn't it? I mean, that's Battle Brothers.
I've seen a lot of people trying to just jump into a fight between Noble House and Raiders, and just casually wait it out because you get the loot. So even if a Noble House footman falls, you get his equipment. So
that's actually not true. They recently changed that. In older versions of the game, it used to be true if anything died on the battlefield, you just got the loot, period. Now your team, your specific brothers have to deal the killing blow or you don't get the loot.
Oh, that's
or what I think you can do, sorry to interrupt, but I have actually had a similar thing again offline where I had raiders fighting some militia, and the militiaman dropped a sword that I wanted, so I went over his corpse and actually picked it up off the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Even though
you can do that as well.
Yeah.
To be fair, I almost never do this. If I use these Noble House forces, it's usually to help me survive, not because I'm actively searching for loot.
Yeah. So
it comes up quite a bit in the Noble War, though, when you're trying to isolate particular high priority targets like the enemy knights to try and knife them down, and they end up getting the killing blow, and you miss out on a famed sword or something because of it, or a great helm.
Yeah.
It feels really bad.
Okay. So basically, I think we can kind of agree that the consensus is there isn't really one way to approach early to mid. It just kind of depends on what you're going to where you're going to find yourself at day 30. I mean, but broadly speaking, Would we say it's fair to say that right in the beginning, you should just kind of get bodies on the field and be prepared to hire some farmhands, some vagabonds that they can actually surprise you. I mean, I even hired a beggar who had 3 stars in melee and 2 stars in melee defense and was actually a superstar despite his low hit points.
Yeah, I usually like the ones that have a lot of fatigue because I don't have to worry that much about, the equipment. So obviously they're gonna die. Someone will always die, especially early game and still in mid game. In my opinion, you can be really good and minimize the casualties, but you're gonna lose some people. So if you get a lot of these kind of people, at least you won't find yourself in a battle where you could have won if those people could have
if you had someone better
or something.
Yeah, if you can see what I've got on stream here, this is my Cripples, Bastards and Broken Things playthrough, which I mentioned in episode 1, where I started off hiring just beggars and just cripples, and here currently I'm in day, 43, and days 0 to 30 were very, very interesting. Having some characters with like 40 attack and 30 hit points was very, very, very difficult, but the one class that is the big takeaway from me is the deserter. I would never have considered hiring a deserter before because of their low resolve, but I've got a couple of guys like this guy here, Freggleton. He started with, I think it was damn near 60 melee skill at level 1, and even though he doesn't have a star in his melee skill, he's pretty viable. I mean, he's got 70 melee skill at level 5, and then a few stars in fatigue and hit points, and his resolve is still only level 36, but I reckon with 2 or 3 more turns I can get his resolve up to 45, and then that's a fairly decent soldier who I bought for 400 something, which is very manageable in that early stage.
Yeah, I actually just tweeted like last night something at the devs because I hired a dude for it was about 400 or 500, I don't remember exactly. And he was surprisingly good. Like I could he was a level 2 character. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, yeah, 600 gold for someone who has 57 melee skill to begin with 3 stars, 48 resolve with a star, and 63 hit points, and it was like 120 something fatigue. So he's a wild man who's strong, basically.
I was going to say, with that amount of fatigue, it can only be a wild man. Amazing.
Yeah, his only flaw is pretty much he had 0, no, below than 0, it was -1 melee defense and -2 or 3 range defense. So that's something you can work on, but very decent. You can use him straight away. He has tons of fatigue. If you can keep him alive, he can climb up really fast with the the melee skill. It's a pretty lucky buy, but you have to rely some of those in mid game, I think.
Yeah, which reminds me, speaking of buying level 1s in the mid game and getting them leveled up, very often the tactic that I'll do is, I don't know if you guys do the same thing, I'll start them off. Even though I want them to be a sword and shield or a shield brother up on the front line, I'll start them for their first level or 2 on the back line just with a pike, just because it's so much safer. It's so disappointing when you hire, like I did the other night. I managed to get a wild man with 3 stars in melee skill and 2 in defense, and then he didn't even survive his first battle. So that's a tip that I definitely recommend some of the newer players out there do. Do you guys do anything different really when you get, a high value level 1 that you want to keep alive?
Yeah, I stick him in the thickest armor I have, the biggest shield I have, and I have him stand in the back with no fatigue because I physically can't move. But Coat of Plate's a great helm and an Orky shield at level 1. They've got like negative 13 fatigue. They are not moving.
I just stand at the back going, oh my god. But then they get very minimal XP then, because isn't it correct to say that the XP your brother gets from a battle, there's a bit of base XP for surviving the battle, and then he gets more XP for the damage they do?
Yeah.
Yes, but I'm still willing to just take the residual EXP when I'm fighting like 24 brigands. Like, I don't want to risk him getting in there, because if he goes closer, the crossbows just chew him apart. It's awful.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to get your opinions on, how would you feel it would affect the game balance if there was some mechanic whereby you could more accurately judge where the skills of your brothers are going to lie before you hire them? So rather than, let's say, just going into town here, and you look at who they've got. I'm looking at somebody here called Journo One Shot. He's got a description as a hunter, born in the hinterlands. Journo has spent much time, yada yada yada. Once employed, it's got a bit of backstory. But then, what if below it said even half a description to just let you know what stars he has, how many stars he has, and in what they are, even if it doesn't give his actual values, just so you can get a rough idea. Because I spent almost 2,000 on a hunter on one time, and he had 3 stars in melee skill and some in resolve. It was just really odd.
For me, the only way I would like doing that, because I like the fact that you don't know what you're getting. Just because they are trying to be hired, they're trying to make a living, so they might not necessarily give you the accurate information as you're trying to hire them, is if it just told you the total number of proclivity stars that they have, not where they're at, not what their base skills are, but just how many proclivities they have. Yeah. That way you can judge on your own whether you want to try risking someone who only has 4 stars when they could technically have all the way up to 9.
Oh yeah, that sounds pretty cool. What do you think, Bosco?
I personally enjoy gambling with your recruits. I find it very enjoyable. I don't know why. It's just part of the fun when you are about to recruit someone and you can only hope that he's good. He's not good. You can always just do what you mentioned earlier, to just use it as a bait. Give it taunt if you must, and then whatever happens. But I've been in a position where somehow they lived through, even though they were crappy, and grew to be useful in the battlefield. So I don't know. I find it enjoyable. It gives you more challenges. What I really enjoy in this game is that every save is different, because you get different people with different things, and you can't control much of it. Sure, you can decide what amount of money you pay for what sort of people to get, but there's still an element of luck. And I like the idea of let's say you go into a bar and try to recruit someone. You don't know who they are or how skilled they are until you actually put them on the battlefield.
It's true. It's all just part of the story as well. And one of the viewers, Johan, here just pointed out this guy was describing who the hunter who I bought who had stars in melee skill. He made a fair point that it kind of allows for tactical flexibility, because even though, say, you're looking for a specialist archer, but if you get someone who's got decent archery skills but also good melee skills, well then, okay, give him quick hands, and then he can shoot at ranged targets, and then quick hands at pike, and then have an even higher attack value with his pike, and there you've got some utility that perhaps you weren't even expecting. So look at it that way.
I usually use the least talented people to be... they're usually at the back row and on the edge, so that they can run for the archers and just be in their way and scare them off.
Speaking of which, I didn't plan on discussing this on this podcast now, but I may as well bring it up. I've been doing some experimenting with playing on expert difficulty, and I found that you run into bandit marksmen as opposed to bandit poachers a hell of a lot earlier, and then that has meant that my standard 6 sword and shields, 6 pikemen / archers behind them don't work, because the unshielded pikeman at the back just gets shot to shit. So it kind of had me think on my feet, and I had a few of those orcish leather-skinned shields lying around, and when I knew I was going to be fighting a marksman heavy lineup, I would just give everybody shields and swords and just run at them, and I found it to be very, very effective. And if you guys do anything similar when you're up against those bloody marksmen, I suppose it doesn't really happen when what almost always seems to happen is the first shot from a marksman is a crossbow that goes straight through your best guy's face and kills him.
Yeah, it really does matter if the marksmen roll with crossbows, the short bows, or the hunting bows.
And God forbid you end up with an unlucky terrain, and they start with height advantage. I even lost a brother or two before I've even gotten my first move off. But
yeah, it's very annoying.
Bad luck, eh? Okay, so I think we've covered quite a bit of early to mid-game tactics, and just looking at these guys here, when I was making this point, it's raised another point I wanted to mention, the designation on the brothers as you're about to hire them. So this guy, for example, is described as Journo One Shot, and the other one is described as Eagle Eye. And I was looking on the wiki at the traits, and that actually reminded me, like under the wiki towards the bottom here, it's got the character titles and traits. So you can actually look at the title of the person you want to hire and get an idea of what kind of trait it's going to have. So the one guy I had here was, where was it? Here you go. So if someone is described as, let's say, Bosco the Butcher, as his title, then his trait is likely to be bloodthirsty. Bloodthirsty is over here. Bloodthirsty is all kills or fatalities a weapon allows, which is very, very nice. So that's something else you should be looking forward to when hiring people. Take a look at the titles, because in the beginning I didn't realize that the titles actually gave you an idea into what kind of traits they were going to have. I thought it was mostly random. So do you guys have any titles that really jump out to you when you're about to hire someone and think, hey, I've got to get that guy?
Yes, but you got to be a little careful with it because it's not 100% accurate.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I hired a guy who was such and such the Fearless. It was a wild man, and he had cocky instead. So there are some things that can bait you in, but Eagle Eye is almost always Eagle Eyes, which is good for an archer, but if it's not an archer, it's kind of a dead nickname because you really don't care if they're eagle-eyed.
Yeah, I even got an archer who was described as being, I think it was one shot. It was something one shot, and he was nearsighted. So I felt a bit cheated about that. I get to get my damn money back for hiring him. So I don't think we need to go through each of the traits point by point, but a couple of the ones I think we can all just quickly shout out as our favorites. For me, my absolute favorite trait has to be Iron Lungs. I mean, the fact that you have a brother who recovers an extra 5 fatigue every turn is just unbelievable. I'm so psyched when I get it every time.
Yeah, after they nerfed Strong, Iron Lungs is now far and away the best, whereas before it was kind of debatable which one was better.
Yeah, I really like Iron Jaw as well.
Iron Jaw is less likely to take an injury, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good one.
So,
I also...
Especially in the early game and mid game, it's really, really useful. As we covered that, it's more like getting your good guys to stay alive.
I've also found that Determined is one of the best ones as well. So it starts combat at confident morale. So basically they're going to start with plus 10 to all their melee and range defense and accuracy. So basically if they have 70 base melee skill, they'll have 77. So just think of it as plus 10 to their melee and range skill, which is amazing if you can get it.
Yeah, the Determined is really nice, but I think it's kind of mitigated by the new morale system. Assuming you're not losing brothers left and right, they've got a 75% chance of starting with Confident anyways, just from Euphoric.
Which is very, very nice. But one thing we can shout out, woe betide any of your men who have Asthmatic as their trait. That's almost always someone I'm going to fire straight away, unless they have ridiculous stars. And then I can
Asthmatic, club-footed, and superstitious. They all go.
Oh, that's the worst. Also, Clumsy isn't great either. I've had Clumsy with a guy who had decent... He was an archer, which was fine. He didn't need the melee skill, but then he ended up injuring himself in a random event because I think he hurt himself. It says he dropped some arrows and hurt himself.
Drunkard can do the same thing, too, where he walks between two brothers training, and you can get some really nasty injuries off of that.
Yeah.
Like, I've had severe concussions, split hands, and all sorts of things off of that.
Oh, my word, split hands. And speaking of random events on the world map, for some of the newer players out there, don't just casually cross mountains. This is something that I've learned the hard way. I got a mission to go clear out a bandit hideout, and I was cutting it very, very close in terms of how much money I had. So I thought instead of looping around by the road, I'd go straight over the mountain. And I didn't have time to wait in the morning, so I crossed the mountains at night, and 3 or 4 of my brothers got dislocated shoulders, bruised knees, hurt feet, and it ended up being almost campaign-endingly bad. So something else to watch out for.
That Falling Rock event is awful. There is a random positive event, though, in the mountains, where you meet a hermit and he gives you an item.
Oh.
I had it one time. It was like day 80 or something like that, but he gave me a tier 1 weapon.
Oh,
he gave me like his grandfather's noble sword or something like that. It was really weird, random. But if you got that early on as a trigger, that would be amazing to get like a day 15 noble sword.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The worst even that happened to me was in a swamp where everybody got sick.
Oh yeah, that's terrible.
And it's basically nerfs you in every possible way, and everybody...
Did you have a rat catcher?
I don't remember. It was I don't know, half a year ago or something like that.
Because from what I remember, it only triggered if you had a rat catcher in your party, which is why I stopped carrying them.
It could have been, I don't know, but I've been very cautious about swamps ever since, because that was just a pain in the ass, and it was going on for like, I don't know, 10 or 20 days. It was such a long time until I got rid of it, and it was just a pain in the ass to fight with anything with that, because it just gives you like minus 20% of melee skill and every other skill. It's just a pain to deal with.
Another fun fact about Sick, you can get an infected wound from it. Don't ask me how.
Oh, man. Man, that's not good. I wanted to point out, so one of my viewers, Browmaster, made the comment that a mechanic like in Darkest Dungeon to pay to get rid of bad traits would be nice. I kind of think that might make the game a touch too easy, but I would point out that some of these traits can actually be removed, and I believe some of them you can kind of manipulate. So, for example, fat. If you're doing a lot of deliveries and just literally moving around the map a lot, eventually that brother will lose the fat trait.
You can lose fight just by having them participate in battles as well. It's timed as well.
I'm looking at some of the other ones here. Superstitious, I don't think you can remove Superstitious though.
Nope, that one's permanent.
Oh, God.
Gluttonous can be removed though. The monk has a chance of talking them out of their gluttonous ways. As well as Drunkard, I believe as well, but I haven't confirmed Drunkard.
Drunken, I'm looking at the descriptions here, and I haven't seen it happen myself, but so has World Map event with choice to flog afflicted battle brother with chance to remove the trait. The trait has a chance to be added to battle brothers during the tavern event buying around for your men.
Now, the flogging has to be a little careful, because the person can desert you if you flog them and they just have a really bad roll.
To be fair, if I got flogged for having a good night out, I'd be pretty pissed and want to leave as well.
Well, when they have a good night out and lose your famed crossbow, you're going to be a little pissed with it.
Oh, man, yeah. I've had that happen as well. Like, you get a very, very nice piece of armor, and one of your brothers gets pissed and loses it, and oh, man, latrine duty for a month.
A fun one that I actually found, though, is a historian can cure your guys of dumb.
It's not only historian, actually. It's anyone who has the bright trait. So under the description here, it says, may share a positive event with dumb characters, resulting in a positive mood boost. So I've had that.
I thought it was historian only. My historian was bright, though.
Well, I don't know if it's the historian class as well, but I do know that it is bright for certain. I had a bright monk who tried to teach a dumb farmhand, and it just pissed off the farmhand, and he was very, very upset about it. Such as the vagaries of the RNG in this game, which I'll enjoy so much.
Yeah, me too. I can totally picture it in, like, a cartoony way. Yeah, just the monk trying to teach the dumb farmhand something, and it's just, would you just fuck off?
Likewise with Spartan, very often with my Spartan brothers, they'll have the event where they show, oh look, you can see they're feeling quite weak, and you can either tell them eat up fool or leave him be, and I've experimented using both options, and it just seems to be a crapshoot either way. I haven't found any way to more reliably get rid of Spartan. Not that I'm
actually A-okay with Spartan. They eat less food. That's actually very helpful.
Well, I do know that if you get them to remove Spartan, they get a boost to Resolve, which is actually quite nice. I managed to get rid of Spartan. They weren't gluttonous. They lost Spartan, but they got +5 Resolve, which was quite nice. Okay, so that's enough of the traits. Let's jump into the perks. Let's have a little discussion about... now, in the last podcast, we didn't really discuss which perks to really focus in the early games. Let's have a little discussion about that. So what kind of ways do you guys approach? And we can kind of weave this into the class builds discussion. If you have classes of brothers, for example, Shield Bearer, Highlander, Archer, typically how do you level them, and which perks do you value over others? So I'll start. Well, Bosco, tell me, so if you've got your starting brothers, which perks do you tend to value the most right from the start?
Well, we touched it a little bit last time, but again, to me, it usually comes down to the actual skills they have. I'm a big fan of Pathfinder, as I mentioned. Mm-hmm. I find it very, very useful at the beginning to have freedom to work around your way on the battlefield. I find
you also shouldn't underestimate part of Pathfinder is it's not only the reduced to AP per tile, it's also fatigue cost reduced by half, and in the early game when you don't have a lot of fatigue, it can make quite a difference.
I quite like fast adaptation as well, especially if your character is very useless or have really bad starting skills.
Or likely to use a one-handed weapon. I tend to take fast adaptation much less on guys who use two-handed weapons who can only attack once a turn. You don't get that much use out of it.
Oh yeah, good shout. Other than that, for archers, I usually choose fast hands really quickly. So if they get cornered or something, they could just easily defend themselves if possible.
Yes. So the description is quick hands. Swapping items in battle becomes a free action with no action point once every turn. Go on.
And if I know someone that I will definitely use in the front row, I often get, well, it's a question of how the fatigue is going for them, but if they have enough, let's say like 70 plus, I usually go for Shield Master, because they're gonna use a lot of shield, and then Brawny. That's usually how I do. I usually go for a lot of heavy armors, except if someone is really crappy with fatigue, then they usually just get a polearm in the back row or something.
Just a quick word on Shield Expert. One of the main reasons I got to very like Shield Expert so much was when I was fighting a greenskin invasion against orcs, because the Shield Expert I found is vital to make your shields last more than just one shot by an orc. So it got to a point where if I have someone who doesn't have Shield Expert, I'll even have them carry a spare shield, because it's super, super disheartening when you have this nice heater shield, or God forbid even a famed shield, and if your brother using it doesn't have Shield Expert, it just gets one shot by a berserker. It's very disappointing.
I think a lot of people use dodge as well in the early game, but for me, I'm not sure it's very useful at the beginning.
You can certainly put dodge on your backline, guys, like your archers. So dodge description is gain 15% of your character's initiative as a bonus to melee and range defense. So it doesn't synergize so well with guys who are wearing heavy armor, who have their initiative lowered, therefore they get less out of it. I've even found an archer who has, for example, 100 odd fatigue. You get 15 ranged and melee defense. And then if you take dodge and what was the other one again? Anticipation. Then your archers are pretty safe against enemy archers.
Well,
I'm going to chime in here.
Yep,
the way the initiative mechanic works, I will never take dodge. Because as you build up fatigue during the fight, it lowers your initiative, and your initiative can go negative.
Yeah.
So I've had a brother who had, 90 max fatigue. He was sitting at, I believe, 70 initiative. He was an archer. He fired 2 arrows, and he went to 12 initiative. So, building up the fatigue in combat, it just tanks your dodge. So it's only good for the first round of combat, or if you're trying to run at them and you're not really using fatigue just because you're just using movement tiles. Yeah. But even that can change based on what terrain you're in. If you're in a forest or a swamp or hills, you're going to still be building up fatigue on it.
Yeah.
So it just tanks you. I still don't like the way that works, that perk in general, just because of the way initiative works in combat.
I thought it was a flat bonus. I didn't realize it was actually recalculating and scaling with the fatigue, and you've just made me realize that I've got 4 archers in one of my playthroughs that are like 90 days in, who are, as the rounds go on, they're getting less and less worth out of dodge. So thanks for that. I've misleveled a few of my brothers. It's disappointing to know.
I'm actually very curious about how you level up your brothers, Gruber, because you have an entire different point of game style.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm very aggressive. I tend to do things that I shouldn't do pretty much 100% of the time in every fight. I go for greed almost every time. I fight things I shouldn't earlier than I should.
So the best defense is a good offense.
Yeah, like on day 10, I'm hunting for orc dens, trying to find me some berserkers. Like, things you should be doing.
You damn savage.
So, level 2, with 0 exceptions, I take student. And the reason why isn't just the EXP bonus that you get up until level 11, is because you can trade a first tier perk once you hit level 11 for any tier perk. And that flexibility, especially with the change to underdog being moved farther down, I think is just very useful, especially considering on most of my characters, I want to focus more heavily on the lower half of the tree rather than on the tier 1 perks.
I'm very glad you actually brought that up. That was going to be my next question, because there's a couple of skills that are quite controversial among my viewers. So in season 1, I took student on everybody at level 1, and then I moved away from that, and I started taking fast adaptation at level 1 or Colossus, depending on shoring up a weakness. And now I've gone back to taking student at level 1, and by that I mean on their first level up. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, because right in the beginning is when I struggle the most. It's the most difficult with those brothers, but it pays off in the long run, and it pays off consistently. I think is what you're saying. So I think we can pretty much agree then that taking student on your first level up is worth doing.
I personally believe so. I know I've had runs where I started Colossus. I've had runs where I've done fast adaptation, and student was more consistently getting my brothers to the late game. And it was making them more useful in the late game, because instead of having, like, once my brother got to 80, 90 melee skill, he didn't need fast adaptation anymore. I would much rather have, like, reach advantage on my two-hander or something like that.
Now that we talk about it, it kind of makes sense to, like, now that we have late game crisis, maybe it pays off to level them up quickly.
Well, another reason why I do that is because right now I'm focusing on using daggers and maces a lot and flails, and so I'm constantly spamming their higher fatigue abilities, and student lets me get to gifted and brawny earlier to get those increased fatigues.
So, talk to me about gifted. I first started taking gifted, and I've kind of moved away from gifted, and my logic in moving away from gifted, I want you guys to critique now. The logic I had with gifted was it's just essentially a dead perk in the way that it's just giving you stats. I mean, the stats it gives you is great. You can even get like a 5 roll on melee skill, but it's not giving you something like a fast adaptation that's giving you +8 to hit, or it's not giving you quick hands or something that just feels more active. It's kind of like it's leveling your brother up, making him more expensive for not really that much value. But I'm beginning to think that maybe that's not the right way to look at it.
Well, for an early tier, you're trying to get those brothers to be able to survive your early encounters and to hit more consistently. I personally think it helps your hit chance more than fast adaptation. It's a more consistent hit. Yeah, and the reason why I take it is because on the second tier, on most of my shield brothers, there is no perk there that I want. They're not usually going to take quick hands. They're not going to take steel brow. I personally don't like that perk, though I could see it being useful in expert Iron Man runs on certain characters. I think holdout's a waste of space. Fortified Mind you take on banner boys only, in my opinion.
Yep, which I do, yep.
Dodge I do not like. A shield bearer does not need bullseye. An executioner, I think, is a...
No one needs bullseye.
Yeah, well, I still actually take it on my archers now. Because when I get into the late game where I'm actually trying to outshoot the archers because I don't want to run my two-handers into the crossbow fire because there's like 7 crossbows, the bullseye does let you help get to those crossbows and be able to focus them down a little easier.
Although, have you not found that, so very often I will be using my archers to try to, in basically a long-range shooting match with the enemy archers, but let's say my archers start first, and they can take shots at the enemy archers, but they're shooting at behind the enemy shield bearers. But I've almost, without exception, found that if you just wait, those enemy shield bearers will move forward, and at the end of the turn, your archers will get a clear shot. So that would then make bullseye not really...
They don't advance unless they lose enough of their archers. If they have, say, you have your 2 archers, because I never have more than 2 right now, because I'm a stickler in my ways, though I might be going up to 3 with the change to archery. If they have, like, say, I'm also talking about late game here, like day 200 plus, when you're fighting and you're not going to wait for a night just because it's not efficient, and they've got, say, many marksmen. That's, 7 to 9 marksmen.
That sounds
and
fucking terrifying.
Let's say half, if not more, are crossbows, because the marksmen tend to have more crossbows than not. You don't want to walk your two-hander dude who has, I'm going to be generous and say 10 range defense. You don't really want to walk him into that, because one headshot, even in the thick armor with Battle Forged, can still cause an injury. Now, if they're hitting your chest, it really doesn't make that big of a difference. It almost never hits the health from the chest. Unless, of course, it's the 4th bolt in the row to hit them, and in which case you got problems anyways.
Yeah.
It's necessary to be trying and pick them off, because once they have more range power than you, and they're almost always going to have more range power, they just have more numbers, they're going to always sit there as long as they have shots. And their bow archers never run out of ammunition.
No.
Yeah,
they
that's
literally
kind of
cannot run out of ammunition. I have sat there for 40 turns, and they shot 2 times every single turn. Like,
and they don't seem to get tired either.
Yeah. Well, no, they do tire out. They do eventually start tiring out. But they don't have the problems that we do with Berserk taking 3 shots a turn, which starts overwhelming our fatigue once we start killing you guys off.
Yeah, I don't... I think it would be cool if they ran out of arrows too. It seems only fair.
Yeah, if they did run out of arrows, I can see you just like sending one shield bro out there and saying, raise your shield, good luck. You're there for 6 more turns and see how they do.
You have a guy who you hired for like 30 gold, some beggar, and you give him some armor. Good luck. Okay, so gifted. We think we should. I feel like I should start taking gifted again. Student at the first level up, then gifted. So, in terms of, let's kind of look at some classes. So, how do you guys generally set up your troops? And I think we're all kind of talking as though the norm is to have 2 rows of 6. Would that be fair to say, or have you guys experimented with other loadouts like 8 frontline guys or 10 frontline guys?
Lately, I've been going 7-5.
I do that too.
And the reason why I overload the front line is because of the way the new morale triggers. So by surrounding your opponents, you're affecting the morale more. And so I actually try and utilize the loss to their morale to my advantage. When they have lower morale due to you being able to more aggressively surround them with a larger front line, you're able to get more consistent hits on them, i.e. with stuns, with flails, with daggers, that sort of thing. Yeah. I've
also now, in a recent offline playthrough, just without even intending to, I found myself getting flooded with melee characters, and I have got my only 2 guys who have any sort of archery skill are my sergeants, who are hybrid crossbow / pikemen, and it's been surprisingly effective because it's kind of putting me back into my very, very first few playthroughs where whenever I saw enemies had archers, I would just wait around till night whenever possible and just attack them at night and run at them. And it's very, very effective. So I'm beginning to feel like I should move away from my standard 6 and 6 into maybe like a 7 and 5 as well.
I'm actually very surprised you don't have a dedicated banner boy.
Well, the thing is, the banner boy is very, very nice, but it's odd how I've worked out. I tend to have 2 banner boys, like a primary one and a secondary one, for a couple of reasons. The primary one generally has a slightly higher resolve than the other one, and he carries the pole arm, the banner. But I do like, because generally I'm giving him quick hands, so he starts with the crossbow, takes a shot for 2 AP, and then quick hands to the pole arm and starts stabbing. And that way he still gets the banner out for the increased resolve people around him. So do you use your banner boys just as pikemen and keep the actual banner out the whole time?
Yes,
yeah,
I do.
I do too.
I can't afford to drop the resolve because I don't focus on leveling up resolve of my characters. So the extra 11 to 14 that he's giving them is vital for them not breaking on the initial hit.
And that's something we should also cover. So I'm generally leveling up resolve on all my characters to at least 45 or 40. And then on top of that, they get a little bit more from the banner boy. Do you reckon that's a bit of a waste of resources? Do you, in the early game, touch resolve?
I pretty much only hire guys that have a starting resolve of around 40 or higher.
So that
way I never worry about it. I am not hiring deserters, refugees, beggars, that sort of thing. The only thing is early on, I'll maybe pick up a vagabond or a messenger here and there just because they are a fatigue up background.
Yep.
And they can sometimes start lower than that. But if they're like sitting around 22 fatigue, like I hired, what was it? It was a farmhand, and he was just like, he was faint-hearted. He had a low roll to begin with. I'm like, all right, you're done. You're just going to have low fatigue. If you break, that's fine. If you die, whatever. We'll just keep going with you, but I'm not going to waste 5 level ups on fatigue to get you on par.
Mm. You've been saying fatigue, guys. You mean resolve. You had very low resolve.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Well then, you might be quite amused then at how I've been bumbling through my cripples, bastards, and broken things playthrough. I'm trying to be a bad guy and hire all cripples.
Yeah, I've been watching it a little bit.
And did you see that one deserter I hired?
Yeah, you hiring deserters hurts my soul, man.
It's certainly not ideal, but it's part of what I wanted to experience with this playthrough. I mean, look at this guy. Psycho Zero, the level 3 Huskell. At level 3, he's got 21 resolve. And
yeah, I can top
irrational as well.
When the new perk hit, I was testing out to see if they changed some of the backgrounds or not. I hired a deserter, and he was, what was it? He was a coward, which is -10.
Yep.
Resolve. He started with 9 resolve.
Oh, man.
After I saw him, like, all right, we're just not going to hire these guys anymore. They'll break at a stiff wind. Like, it's just not worth it.
But I don't know. Like, I mean, I'm kind of getting schooled by what you guys don't even know about deserters, but I was very, very impressed with these deserters because it felt like I was just sinking 3 or 4 levels of level ups into resolve, and then they are pretty passable soldiers. I mean, I'm looking at this guy here. He's a level 3 Huskell who's got 43 in range skill with 3 stars and 1 star in range defense. So I think if I can just shore up his resolve, he'll be a pretty damn good soldier, particularly because he's got 3 stars in initiative. So I think it would be fair to say that we're not going to say never hire deserters, but it's probably fair to say that...
I'm going to say never hire deserters.
Really?
Well, the opportunity cost. You're using, 5 level ups on resolve? That means you have lower defenses, lower fatigue, or lower melee skill, and those are all the 3 premium combat stats right there.
Yeah. So when
you're trading premium stats for a secondary stat, and it's just... In the late game, you just can't afford to have a guy who's got, say, 6 melee defense lower, 4 range defense lower. He's got a little bit less fatigue, so you don't really want to put him in that thicker armor. It's just awkward the way I found it.
I would just point out that when I'm hiring like bastards, gravediggers, deserters, I'm not expecting them to be long-term fixtures in the team. These are guys that I'm hiring where I'm just expecting to help me shore up until the mid to late game where I can start affording, disowned nobles. Squires have actually surprised me with how good they can be.
God, I hate squires.
You don't like them?
No! The only thing they have going for them is they have a bunch of positive events from having other backgrounds.
Yeah.
But for their cost, for the gear they come with, they are incredibly overpriced. I would rather wait like an extra 3 days and hire a cheap sellsword rather than a squire.
Okay. So I think there's a few other perks we should probably take a look at here because we've been looking at early-ish game perks. And yeah, I'm just trying to get my bloody game to go back to green. 1 second. Sorry, guys. So we've looked at student, we've looked at recover. I can't ever seem to find a space for a skill like recover. I can't see myself taking it because it's great, it gives you lots of fatigue back, but you have to spend an entire turn to get that benefit from it. Have you ever used it?
I experimented with it, but even with 50% of fatigue getting back, it still doesn't seem to worth it, in my opinion.
I think if they made it to 75% or even fully, then I might start taking it, but you're losing an entire turn. Just
I take it on 2 specific character types, maces and warhammers.
I guess because of how fatigue intensive they are to swing and to use their abilities.
Yes, because if you're using maces or warhammers, you're using their specialty skills pretty much every swing, or at least I am.
Yeah,
the maces at least. And the warhammers, the only time I ever bring those bad boys out is orcs, and you're pretty much destroying armor every swing too. And they tend to be a long fight, so the fatigue does actually help there.
Yeah. And what about adrenaline? I can't see a use for adrenaline, also because of how demanding it is on your fatigue.
Adrenaline, I have only ever seen effective use on one type of character, and it was a guy's sword master in the very late game.
Well, that kind of makes sense.
The two-handed sword, you mean, or?
No, it was a one-handed sword duelist.
Oh, okay.
And so he was using his turn to riposte all of them, and he would just waited until the end of the round, and then it came back to him, and he used adrenaline so that he went first so he could take 2 swings and kill off the dude.
Yeah, makes sense.
So he was using it to kill a high priority target.
Yeah, that makes sense. Bags and belts, I can't see.
It's worthless with the change.
Absolutely worthless, because even if you get 2 extra slots, it's going to cost you fatigue to actually have to carry that stuff anyway. It just doesn't seem like.
Well, they changed it. It used to be 2 extra slots, and what you carried in your extra slots did not cost fatigue.
Yeah,
they got rid of the did not cost fatigue, and it's just not worth it anymore for the perk point.
Absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, I would agree. 9 lives as well. This is something that I thought was interesting, because I was watching the dev do his playthrough, and he was talking about, he hires this guy who's got 2 stars in melee skill. He's like, this guy's very important. I want to keep him alive, so I'm going to go ahead and take 9 lives. And I thought,
you'd have been better off with Colossus.
Taking Colossus. That was my first thought as well. I mean, generally when I'm leveling up, I'm looking for skills that are going to have trigger, quote unquote trigger, or have an effect on every swing, on every time you get swung at, So 9 lives is amazing, but it only helps if you've met a few other conditions, and even then it's only saving you from 1 killing blow. I mean, if an enemy, God forbid, you're surrounded, I mean, you're going to be taking probably 8-9 swings.
Maybe a fifth of the positions where you trigger 9 lives are you not going to have it swung at again. Yeah, so it's just, I think it's a wasted perk point.
And not only that, if you're hit with a cleaver, you'll just bleed to death anyway.
That too.
It's no good. Crippling strikes, I've had some good success with crippling strikes. I quite like it on my pikeman or crossbowman, any of the weapons that tend to go, because my understanding, and I may well be wrong, but my understanding is you want crippling strikes on your weapons that either do higher damage or have higher armor piercing value, because it needs to do hit point damage to roll for a wound.
Because a wound, you have to, I think it's 15 damage is the minimum threshold, and Crippling Strikes lowers that to 10. So Crippling Strikes are actually really good on Warhammers, because they always do a minimum of 10 health damage.
You're always inflicting a wound on every shot.
Yes. Yeah. Except on Orcs. But that's because Orcs have a different threshold for wounding, which is why my dagger, who was trying to puncture them down and give them wounds, just wasn't working.
I've got to say that seems like quite an amazing visual. This gigantic lumbering orc and a guy with like a little dagger. Come at me, bro! I'm gonna stab you.
It took I don't even know how many punctures it took to kill that frickin' warlord.
I can't imagine. This actually reminds me now of how does it work with Executioner, because I've used Executioner a couple times. Now the description here says, inflict additional 20% damage against targets that have sustained any injury effects, like a broken arm. But that makes me wonder, if I've got a crossbowman with crippling strikes and I take a shot at an uninjured target, and on that first shot I give him an injury,
it does not trigger the 20%
It does not trigger 20%. It's only on the
because it does the damage first, and then it triggers the injury.
That's exactly what I was wondering about. So that kind of then is a bit of a counter argument for taking Executioner, because I've always thought if you've hurt an enemy and wounded them, they're kind of a bit less threatening anyway. So is Executioner
not always. Sometimes you want to finish that target you're focusing down. I actually found Executioner to be very nice on my dagger bro, just because they almost consistently gave a wound on anything other than an orc. And just being able to get that extra 20% on the puncture was really helpful.
So this makes me wonder if I'm leveling my ranged characters correctly. So generally, I'll be building a crossbowman. I'll level differently to an actual archer using a bow and arrow. So I'll be much more likely to take crippling strikes and Executioner on the crossbowman as opposed to the archer. I feel like the archer is going to be triggering wounds a lot less. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, that and the fact that I never run a crossbow past the early game.
Yeah. So why is that though? I've always found...
Why is that? Because once you hit around 70 to 75 range skill, the archer starts to outdamage, or the bow starts to outdamage the crossbow. And I'm talking a normal crossbow to a hunting bow. I'm not even talking about a war bow. Though the war bow vastly outdamages the heavy crossbow and the siege crossbow.
The war bow is amazing.
The war bow is good.
Okay.
Yeah, and once your archer can... like you reached that level you mentioned, 70 75. I found it really useful that you can actually shoot twice. That's a huge...
Yeah, the second shot can help a lot.
Like against the crossbow, which, yeah, it deals good damage usually, but still, 2 shots are pretty good, especially if you pump it up with Berserk. Then you might...
Yeah, the crossbow consistently gets injuries, but it doesn't consistently kill, which the bow I was finding more consistently killed the enemy.
Yeah, and I usually use like archers to weaken the enemy so that my melee guys can take it down easier, so I'm not usually fishing for actually killing people with my bows.
Oh, I use my bows to focus on high priority targets. They are very good at shooting down swords masters. If you're in the Noble War, sergeants, they're banner boys.
Yeah, most
the
certainly.
enemy archers.
I don't say I never
The
did
spy
that.
handers especially have awful ranged resistance or range defense, so you can just shoot down the spy handers very easily.
Well, I'm loving this discussion, and especially because it's making me realize how badly I've been leveling everybody. I'm having like this after the fact. I'm just cringing at how I've been leveling at all my guys, but it's just part of the journey and part of the joy of the game. It's just kind of figuring stuff out yourself. It is nice to get a lot of feedback in, but there's no better way of figuring out how stuff works than actually just trying it and having it fail and having it work.
Another thing that helps you sway toward the bow is the fact that the bow mastery is about twice as good as the crossbow mastery.
Oh yeah, that extra range is amazing.
The increased vision it also gives you on top of the range, the plus to vision increases your chance to hit as well. It's the only mastery that just inherently increases the base chance to hit with the weapon.
And if you're super lucky and you get yourself an archer who has eagle eyes, he'll be shooting. He can shoot 9 tiles in that case on level ground, isn't it? Because it's 7 base plus 1 from the mastery and plus 1 from his vision.
I actually don't remember. It's been a very long time since I had an archer who had eagle eyes.
Well, hopefully one of our viewers can let us know if they've ever been through that, because that sounds like something that would be amazing. Okay, let's move into the last little bit of our discussion here. Let's take a look at the tier 3 perks, and then we can wrap this up because we've gone over an hour. We've got a little bit more to go through here. Hang on, so Derminator says the bow has an inherent max range, 8 is maximum. Okay, so it does seem then like 9 tiles wouldn't be feasible or wouldn't happen, which kind of, I suppose that's fair. They have to cap it at some point.
No, but the vision range does increase, so it lets you be able to more easily identify where those pesky necros are sitting without having to use a falcon.
And speaking of which, like, I mean, since they introduced the falcon, I absolutely love it. And you start thinking, like, how did I ever survive without using a falcon? Trying to find a necromancer without a falcon is such a pain.
I've started carrying 2 to 3 falcons on my late game parties.
Oh, really?
Well, when you're in like a forest or a swamp, it's very helpful to be able to isolate which bush or if they took a side path on a priority target. Like, I had a frickin' hedge knight try and outflank me in a forest, and that second falcon really helped.
Okay, so tier 3 perks, Backstabber. This is something I've not taken before, and I'll be very curious to hear what you guys think about, because I have a mechanical question about it. So the description is, honor doesn't win you fights. Stabbing the enemy where it hurts does. The bonus to hit chance in melee is double to plus 10 for each ally surrounding and distracting your target. But now, if that means you have 2 rows, 6 of your guys and 6 of their guys, if your guy in the middle of that formation has Backstabber, my understanding is that Backstabber won't do anything for you.
No, you will get a 10% bonus to hit instead of a 5% for the surround for having one of your extra brothers on him as well.
As in to his left and to his right, even though that guy is marked by another enemy.
Yep. All it cares is how many of your dudes are surrounding them. It doesn't matter how many of their allies they have surrounding them. So even if you're in base contact with your front line, with their front line, you will always have 2 dudes on each contact. Same with them.
Because that kind of makes me feel like Backstabber is worth taking then. Did you guys take Backstabber?
I do not, just because it's only a 5% chance to hit, and it doesn't help if your character is isolated. I tend to not take it because you already get a 5% inherent boost from surrounding for each particular ally. This isn't going something like you don't have a bonus to hit and now it's a 10%. This is going from a 5 to a 10%. So in that case, it's an inherent... I would take fast adaption before I take backstab.
Because fast adaption is going to trigger more often.
I usually don't take
Generally.
Backstabber as well. Basically because it... I don't know, it seems very it seems only useful at the beginning, where you have bigger groups fighting each other. But once that resolves, you're gonna go this way or that way. So your party will split around the battlefield, and then it's kind of useless, in my opinion.
Yeah, one of my viewers said they'd take it on pikemen. I did try it on pikemen for a while, and I decided on the higher difficulties, I would rather have a more defensive option. So I was taking either underdog or anticipation, whichever one I felt was more necessary in the character.
Yeah, I agree.
And I try and build my backliners to be able to fight orcs as well, so underdog has started to take a very high priority for my backliners.
Okay, so that moves on to the next one, anticipation. So when being attacked with ranged weapons, gain 1% plus 10 of your base range defense as additional range defense per tile that the attacker is away. So clearly we shouldn't be taking dodge on our backline archers. Is anticipation then something that's worth investing in? My intuition tells me is that it's yes, it is worth taking on your archers.
Yeah, I take it on almost all of my backliners, unless it's a backliner who doesn't have a very good proclivity in range defense. I'm just not getting good rolls, in which case I'll just give them underdog and I'll use them to fill the gaps that are missing in my line.
I usually give anticipation to anyone who doesn't have a shield, basically. Just try to balance it with it.
Yeah, I do not take anticipation on my two-handers. My frontline two-handers.
On my two-handers, what I've been doing is, I've always found that those first few turns before the battle lines are joined, if you will, is where they eat arrows like you can't believe. So even though I have a guy who wants to use his gigantic two-handed axe, he starts the battle with a little round shield and a dagger, just so that then, he's got that extra bit of defense against the arrows getting shot at him. And then once he's actually face-to-face, he uses quick hands to get his weapon out. I have the feeling it's not the most efficient use of skills and fatigue, but I've had a lot of success with it.
For me, it comes down to how many perk points I have. And I have a very specific build for my two-handers that has 0 perk flexibility, so I can't afford to take quick hands or anticipation just because of how I build my character.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that obviously we have different approach to the game, like different play style, and that has a heavy impact on how you level up your brothers. So I don't think just throwing it out there, it's not the way you have to build your characters, it's the way we do. But that's the point of the
I think your perk builds mainly depend on your play style. I go very aggressively and very heavy in fatigue, and I focus very heavily from my early game on getting heavier armors than I notice a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Because I believe I was watching you, Stobbie, and you were on I think day 60 or so. It might have been you. I'm trying to remember. And you had a single mail hauberk, and that was your thickest piece of armor. And I'm
yeah.
Well then, I usually have a piece of mail by day 20. And I start picking them up from there. By day 60, I'm trying to push scale as hard as I can.
Oh yeah, that's been the one main takeaway that I've learned, is that I need to get heavier armors quicker. And I didn't initially think that my shield bearers would be using brawny and heavier armors, but it's clear that you absolutely have to. If you're going to be on the front line trading blows, you need that heavy armor and you need battle forged.
Especially if you don't have the higher tier shields like the kite shields or a famed shield of some kind.
I think nothing makes that point more clearly than when you're fighting orcs and you've got your 110 points of armor, which gets one shot by an orc.
Yeah, you don't fight orcs with 110, especially not the big ones. Though, like I said, I've been really freaking greedy against berserkers lately. Because I've been really lucky in that all my two-handed brothers have been getting iron lungs, which has just been amazing. And you can't use an orky two-handed weapon without iron lungs. You take 2 swings, your character's done for the fight. With the iron lungs, you can get up to 5, 6 if you're lucky, if they have a really good roll and they're a wildman.
And then you could, I've been wondering about this, because the way you can pick things up off the ground, can you swing that orc weapon for a few times and then drop it on the ground and then go to another one?
You can't manually drop it on the ground without having the swap.
Interesting.
So if there's an item on the ground, you can pick it up and replace the item you're carrying with it. If there's no item on the ground, you cannot click and drag your weapon to the ground.
So viewer Blunt Trader points out, I've watched 2 of you playing this game, and it's funny that there are so many ways to go through the game perk-wise, that at the most perks you can't say everyone uses it, or it's best you can do it level 1. And that just kind of underscores what Bosco was saying, that we can sit in theory craft until the crows come home about what is the single best way to level your brothers. And what I'd like us to do on the next podcast is to have a few build classes ready. But again, guys have got to understand these are guidelines and figure out what works for you. I mean, you can have Hans Gruber's level up tactics, but if you're not going to play his way, you're not going to get the most out of it.
Oh, you'll probably get more out of it.
Okay, next skill, shield expert. So learn to better deflect hits to the side instead of blocking them head on. The shield defense bonus is increased by 25%. Also applies to the amplified shield bonus from the shield wall skill. Additionally, shield damage received is reduced by 50% to a minimum of 1, which for me, that last little bit of it, the shield damage received is one of the biggest reasons I take shield expert. And it's something I do take on my shield bearers.
With the change to underdog, shield expert has become my tier 3 pick of choice for my shield bearers in the early game.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the best defensive tool you can now get, now that underdog is now pushed to a later tier.
Mm.
And another thing of interest is that, I don't know if any of the developers are going to watch this or listen to this, but there's currently a bug. The bonus to the shield defense bonus increased by 25%. That applies to the flails ignoring bonuses as well as the shield wall as well.
Yeah, I found that as well, yeah.
So it's one of the few things you can take on a shield bro that help your capabilities against enemy flail users.
And enemy flail users can be a real pain in the ass early on. It's just no way to stop getting hit by them. Anything to add to that,
maces.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of shield expert, but that's mainly because I'm a really, really defensive player. So usually keeping everyone or most of the people alive comes first to me, and it's an incredibly useful perk to have. I don't take it when I know someone will be most definitely in the back row, or when I see someone I might want to give him a two-handed sword or something like that. Then it feels a waste, even though it keeps him alive. But other than that, I usually take it. It's pretty useful.
Agreed. I also take shield expert, one of my favorite skills. Next, brawny, just a straight fatigue penalty for armor and helmet by 30%. I think we can agree that it's kind of an essentials perk that you kind of have to have. It just gives you so much fatigue effectively. Would you agree? That's not one you can skip on.
It's a must-have for every single character, including your archers.
Yeah, especially for the late game. You don't have to, you reach tier 3. It doesn't have to be your priority. Of course, again, it
but you want it at some point.
But at some point, yeah, it's a must.
So, Hans, I've never really hit the super late game. I mean, I've entertained the thought of my archers never really going above padded leather, but clearly that's not the way to do it, based on what you're saying. So are you also putting super heavy armor like scale on your, well no, it's not super heavy, but heavy armor like scale on your archers as well?
It depends. My last run through that I was doing, my archers ended up having a famed padded leather, which was putting them around 170, 180, and I was still finding that was a little too low for me. So before I used to just stick them in scale armor and call it good, but I also didn't give them anticipation and a lot of range defense. So it goes back and forth. The lower their armor is, the lighter it is, the more shots I can generally get in a combat.
Yeah.
Because in the late game, they always 100% fatigue anyways.
Yeah. And the way I look at it is, what disinclines me for putting heavier armor on my archers is that I don't want to have them wear heavy armor to keep them safe if they get caught out in melee combat, because if my archers get caught in melee combat, things have gone very badly wrong anyway, and that's something tactically I shouldn't have let happen anyway.
I use footwork on my archers 100% of the time. Yeah. Now, getting them to that level, usually in the early game, you don't have to worry about them getting in melee combat, unless it's just a really, really big clusterfuck of a zombie fight. That's the only time they ever get in melee.
Or an orc warrior has bashed into your lines and moved people around. And
I don't fight orc warriors with my archers until they have footwork. Orc warriors are the only thing I stick to a rule. I do not fight orc warriors until a certain...
It's funny you have taking archers against orcs, because I've had real mixed results. It either goes incredibly well or spectacularly badly. I did have one fight where we started out, I had my whole backline had a mix of crossbows and archers, and even my front line. This is when I was experimenting with this really crappy build where I'd get, even my front line would have a minimum of, I would level their range skill up to about 50 and give them throwing weapons. So all 12 of my brothers could lay down ranged fire, and I managed to take down 6 orcs before they even hit our front lines, and it was so effective. But I kind of felt like that was sort of niche because we started on high ground anyway, and I can't see that being reliable.
Yeah, throwing weapons just in general aren't reliable for me, because once you get into the late game, there's too many enemies and you run out of throwing weapons.
Yeah.
Like, currently there's something on the forums of some guy was claiming that throwing weapons are making polearms obsolete, and, like, I'm just like, have you gone into the Black Monolith? Have you tried a Warlord tent? Like, come on! There's no way you can carry enough throwing weapons for that fight.
But I think we have to agree, though, that the thrown axes do a pretty damn good amount of armor damage for how cheap they are, and, you know, if you consider them as literally a throw-away weapon, you know, an extra bit of armor damage on an approaching orc warrior is better than nothing. But
well, the thing that I found,
whether you think it's worth taking up an item slot or using the AP is for you to decide that.
For me, it's the opportunity cost of getting their range skill to the point where they can reliably use the weapon.
Indeed, you'd rather be putting that into melee skill or fatigue or something else.
Yes, I'd rather put it into a relevant combat staff or like a shield bro or something like that. I would rather him have that little bit of extra fatigue or some range defense, which I usually neglect on my frontliners because they have shields.
Yeah, me too.
And what I was finding, because I tried a build where I was going, it was a veteran Iron Man, I did it recently, where I was trying to focus on using throwing weapons in the early game and trying to focus very heavily on them. And what I was finding was the opportunity cost of raising the ranged weapons was causing them to suffer so much. I got wiped by a party of Brigand Raiders. Just because they all had shields. My guys all still sucked with the throwing weapons.
Can't hit them. Yeah.
And I didn't have the defensive capabilities to not soak every single freaking hit.
Do you ever take the throwing weapon perk? Throwing weapon master, is it called, I think?
No, because I never use throwing weapons by the time they get to that level.
Me neither. And I mean, if you look at, okay, fine, it gives you less fatigue when you throw the weapons, but you've only got 4 weapons that you're throwing, so they're going to run out quite quick. Thanks for the follow, just Kate. But then damage is increased by 40% when attacking at 2 tiles of distance, and damage increased by 20 when attacking at 3 tiles of distance. So again, how often are you actually going to be throwing at someone from 2 tiles away?
Well, with the new archery change, you can actually consistently get the 2-tile range.
Oh, because you'd be throwing over someone's shoulder?
Yes. Yeah. With the new change to archery, that's why I was trying it out. The problem was that all my guys frickin' died before I could get to it.
This made me think, I know, Bosco, you've done a playthrough where your group of brothers was called the Hoplites, which, if memory served, you had shields and javelins and shields and spears, a mix. How did you find it work out for you?
The thing is, it only comes worthwhile when you have a decent ranged skill, at least 60, but more like 70. But I actually didn't get very far with the hoplites so far, but on my offline campaign I played around with that, and the janitor I mentioned to you before, he has really good chances of hitting. I think, you know, you can throw 4 times, 4 times. So he hits at least twice, and that could be pretty good, especially if I like the javelins because it deals more damage than the axes. Obviously, axes
it doesn't do much to armor though.
Yeah. So it's balanced out, so it makes sense to switch it around. But sometimes you can hit some enemies real good with a javelin. But the thing is, as you mentioned, you either get a good opportunity to do or not. So the thing is, you can force it to, I'm gonna throw all my javelins because I made this character so it can throw javelins. If the battle goes a certain way, it's better if you just don't use it.
Okay, here's my theory crafting of my shitty throwing weapon build. I've just thought about this. It's kind of lol worthy, but all right, here's what you do. You take fast adaptation, bags and belts. Let's see.
I already see where this is going.
You're going to need gifted, and then you carry like a round shield, and then you have 5, because you can have 1 javelin in hand and 4 in your inventory, which will give you a total of, 20 javelins you can throw?
Oh, don't forget adrenaline, so you can throw 4 at once.
Oh, but and instead they're completely exhausted and not able to do anything for rounds 3 and 4. But this could be something that we can try. And generally, Bosco and I were kicking around the idea of every few podcasts we'll recommend a build of the month. So like on episode 1, I recommended the cripples, bastards, and broken things, where you just try to get as far as you can with the worst troops you possibly can. And this sounds like it could develop into a challenge. Find some of the worst troll-worthy builds and try to make them work. Like, I'm just trying to imagine what it would look like if you had 12 brothers, all with round shields and javelins, just throwing a hail of javelins. It would be so expensive as well.
The thing is,
well, first off, you're going to run out of money.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because you're literally throwing money away.
I think throwing weapons only worthwhile at the mid to late game. I can't say for certain, but I think you have to be around level 6 or 7 to start thinking about it. Yeah, that's just my opinion, because before you have a decent range skill, even if you don't take the throwing weapon mastery, it doesn't worth the fatigue, the quick hands. I
think we can all agree, as Hans pointed out, the opportunity cost is just too great. I think let's move on. We've got 3 more perks here, and we're coming up on the hour and a half mark. So rotation unlocks a rotation skill, which allows 2 characters to switch places while ignoring zone of control, as long as neither character is stunned, rooted, or otherwise disabled. Quick thing I want to say about this is, my initial thought was, this is something I want on all my frontline guys, but then that was very quickly disabused of me, because if I find someone who's in huge trouble up front, when that moment comes up and I want to rotate him out, he doesn't have the fatigue to use it. So I've had more success giving it to backline guys who can rotate the frontline guy out of trouble, but then that backline guy needs to be able to use a shield. So I'm still sort of not sure of exactly how I should be using it, and I was curious as to how you guys use rotation and when.
For the late game, I've been picking up rotation on my banner boy, and the sole reason for that is orc fights. When the orc warriors get on my archers in the back line, if they're too fatigued to footwork out, I'll rotate my banner boy in just to soak the hits so the archer can get away. But other than that, I've been finding footwork has been more reliable than rotation.
Isn't the fatigue cost the same for rotation and footwork?
Footwork is 30. I think rotation is 25. I can check that.
So then, don't you find that if you could use, let's say generally when I want to pull someone back, it's a frontliner who's just getting his head bashed in.
Yep.
And when he's in trouble, then so often he doesn't have the fatigue to be able to use footwork or rotation. So maybe I should just get good.
They are both 25 fatigue.
They're both 25. Okay.
I usually would. I'm still experimenting with it, because if I'm honest, I wasn't using it for a long time, and then I realized it's so useful sometimes. But I don't give it to everyone. So it's usually a few frontliners. It's usually because I'm not really good with late game strategies, I found, and usually the person at the edge of the front line is getting in trouble. So I was like, I can quickly switch when he gets worked up too quickly with someone who has more fatigue, more fresh, and then hopefully we can take out somebody. But I have to say that it didn't really pay off. Didn't really work the way I wanted. So
really, the only way I've had the only way I've had a lot of success with rotation is I have. You guys, if you've watched me stream, I'm quite fond of the Huskal class, which is a guy who sits on the flanks in the back line, and his main job is to use a 2-handed axe and either chop people in the face or break shields. So I give him axe expert and rotation and shield expert. So his job is to break shields, and if someone in the front line gets into trouble, he can rotate them out and whip out his shield. And that's where I found it to be the most useful. Again, putting it on the front line, guys, it just doesn't seem to... I always get into that clutch moment and I just can't pull it off.
Well, if you want to do a really troll thing and you're having the Noble or Crisis first, you can pick rotation up on all your guys and just throw all of your allied nobles in because you can rotate them.
that reminds me, I discovered that this morning quite similarly, where I was trying to dagger down an enemy raider, and then it was a caravan hand who just stepped in and started bashing him, which was irritating me. So I thought, well, I wonder if I can rotate this caravan hand out. And there you go. I rotated the caravan hand out. And speaking of caravan hands, if you guys haven't seen, I released a little video on my YouTube channel. It's a 10-minute long video where it was a few patches ago before they fixed the AI on the caravan guards, where there was one enemy berserker and 4 orc young, and then there were 6 caravan hands that just walked up to this berserker and fed him 6 stacks of rage.
Personally, I love the suicidal caravan. Those guys were hilarious.
Well, the good thing is that you have to admire their bravery. Like, this guy's carrying a butter knife and he's running at a berserker that's got the 2-handed flail. I'm like, well, that's a set of cojones on that caravan hand.
It's sort of the same when the peasants go for you just to brawl you. It doesn't make any sense. Like, the AI is pretty good 99% of the time, but it just doesn't make any goddamn sense to me for the peasants to rush towards
I kind of feel like they've kind of gone a little too far in the extreme with the caravan hands. I've had a few caravan hand missions where it's really, really close and it's coming down to the wire and they're just huddling around the donkey and it's like, hello, can you come help me, please?
Yeah.
The caravan hands are very much more defensive now. They will just stay around the donkey. The caravan guards will come out and help you.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's move on. So, ready for troops. Not much to say about this really, other than get it on your banner, boys, and use it. Anything else want to add on?
What we can talk about is the nerf they did to it, where it will no longer bring your guys to confident morale.
Which, to be fair, I think they had to do.
It was a huge nerf.
But it was one they had to do because, I mean, I think it was, who was it? I was reading in the forums, a guy I think called Warmaster was making the point about it's kind of silly where you have, just imagine the battle where you've got guys fighting and there's blood splattering and then some dude in the back just blowing on a trumpet nonstop. It's a bit farcical. And it's just raising everyone's morale. And it's the skill is called rally the troops, rallying someone who's fleeing. So I think the way that they've changed it is 100% right.
I don't know. I personally think that it gave your banner boy a lot more utility in the late game because right now he just sucks with a mediocre pike. Most of the time he's just standing there. He's like, you guys have resolve. I can rotate you out and I will attempt to swing and it missed.
Which actually reminds me, I would hope that they could give you an option to upgrade your banner because it just doesn't do enough damage. Or they should give you a chance to if they could give you a chance to take the banner and put it onto a bullhook, for example, or a long axe, that would be great.
Yeah. Paul did mention that he was looking at maybe trying to work in like a legendary version of the banner that's very hard to find in very late game. But like you said, it was pure speculation of something that he would like to look at in the future.
I would love if, or one solution to this problem could be, I actually don't know the name of that loading because I'm not a native speaker, but you also get that part of thing that you can put on your brother that gives you like plus something resolve. I think
the sergeant sash?
Yes, that's the one thing.
Yeah.
Maybe they should turn that into the same thing as your banner, and then you wouldn't lose a weapon.
I quite like that, yeah. But we'll see what they do. I mean, currently I like the way that they've changed the way resolve works and your banner gives AoE resolve. And by the way, the deserters that you seem to hate so much, Hans, I've had them be reasonably effective as long as I keep my banner out because that guy who had 20-odd resolve was getting another 15 from the banner boy. So that's not all bad.
Yeah, I was mainly fighting the big problems, though, in the big undead fights because when they get back up underneath the ground, if they're already engaged with someone else, it still triggers their resolve.
Oh yeah.
So it was just so many resolve triggers that they didn't have a solid resolve base. They just eventually started breaking faster than I could rally them.
Oh yeah, I found that as well. I'm just trying to stick up for my deserters who I've got a soft spot for. I quite like them. Except I would never ever hire a deserter. God forbid if you've got the undead late game crisis and you're having to fight ghosts all the time. That would just be an absolute disaster. Because every time those ghosts scream at you, they would die. Okay, last but not least, one of the most troll-worthy skills, Taunt. Unlocks the Taunt skill, which makes opponents take offensive actions instead of defensive ones. and attack the taunting character over another potentially more vulnerable one. The only thing I would point out, because I've experimented with this briefly, is that it can be good, but not often enough. And it's only on adjacent targets, because I used taunt on an enemy who was using a pole axe. So it was 2 tiles away and it didn't work. So generally,
they had recently changed taunt since the last time I've used it. With the perk update that they did, taunt now has a 4 tile range. I was using it on my historian. I was leveling up just to piss people off.
So you've got this guy at the back with his book saying, "Have at you, noob."
He only had enough fatigue to taunt. He couldn't move, he couldn't swing, but taunt... Let me see. How many does it take? It takes 15 fatigue, so he had enough to taunt and not move. It was ridiculous. The thing that I don't like about taunt is that the best action an enemy can take against you in combat is a defensive one. Every time they shield up, it is good for you.
Yeah.
Because they're not rolling the dice of taking a hit.
I personally almost never use taunt. I don't know exactly why is that, to be 100% honest. Somehow I always looked over it.
And
it's really only there to as a counter to swords masters who just sit there and riposte all day. It's not 100%, it's like an 80% chance of them not riposting that turn. They can still riposte while doing it, which is annoying.
Yeah,
if it was a guaranteed 100% they cannot take a defensive action, I could see it being useful.
To me, it sounds like you would when I first read it, as I leveled my characters for the first few times, I imagined it to be more like, helping someone to survive. Someone is about to die, you use taunt, the enemy attacks that dude instead, and you can, get away with it.
It's just kind of a nothing skill, because if in that situation, rather just have rotate or footwork and then have that person get out of trouble that way, rather than have the skill, that still means your brother's going to be taking damage that way. So I think we can agree. I don't know what kind of changes they could make to it to make it more tempting. Like maybe if they say, okay, fine, the person attacks you, but then they get an accuracy debuff, but a damage increase, so it's less likely to hit you, but it hits harder if it does.
Or maybe if you if it triggers a resolve check because you're threatening or something. Like you're losing
but that wouldn't really work, because I mean, if you
longer range is pretty much the only thing I can think of, because the way it reads is that it's forces them to engage you, so they might run out of position. But with the range that it currently has, it doesn't matter if they take 2 steps forward. You want them to be able to charge you a full distance.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the tier 3 skills we've gone through. We've done damn near an hour and 40 minutes. I think we've had a very good discussion. Let's call it a day here. And Hans, we'd love for you to come back for another episode, because there's loads more to talk about.
Absolutely, man.
I do think we still need to go for a full breakdown of all the other perks, all the way up to tier 7.
I'm down.
We can do tiers 4, 5, 6, and 7 next time. I'd also like for you guys to come with a few pre-built ideas that we can recommend to some of the viewers. Like, if you want a shield bearer, here's your perk leveling up order, and if you want an archer, here's your leveling up order, that type of thing. I'd also encourage all of you out there watching and listening, if you've got any questions for us, any suggestions, please let us know in the comments. We'll be sure to include them in episode 3. Also, please tweet at the developers. We'd love to get one of the devs on here to come chat to us. That has to, I think, be the hope for our little podcast here. And in terms of how often we do this, we'll try weekly, but I think that might end up being a little too much. And, we all have stuff to do. We're all terribly hardworking people. So we'll try to keep this every 2 weeks. A little bit of a discussion. We'll cover patch notes. We'll cover new developments and, troll build of the week. As always, we're up for suggestions. So let us know what you guys think. Well, before we go, Bosco, Hans, let the viewers know where they can find you on social media and your YouTube and Twitch channels. And then we'll sign off. Hans?
I'm pretty much not using any social media right now. I'm just on Twitch. I'm not doing YouTube. I'm not doing Twitter, none of that. I'm just a chilled, relaxed streamer. I stream pretty much every day, and I stream anywhere from 4 hours to 18. It really depends on if I get a migraine or a headache, but you can find me at Twitch, www.twitch.tv/HansGruber, and it's Hans with a Z and an underscore. And you'll mostly find me playing indie games. I've been lately binging on Battle Brothers, and I'm going to be delving into some Darkest Darkest Dungeon here coming up here pretty soon.
Oh, I'm going to have to do some Darkest Dungeon as well at some point. It's just when someone mentioned the words Darkest Dungeon, I had that little spark. Oh God, I've got to play that again. I haven't played it in months. Bosco, where can the people find you?
I'm Bosco the First on everything except Twitch, because that's Bosco the Bear. Let's not get into why, because that's a little bit long, but yeah, that's about it. You can always find me there. As terms of my content, it's always very it's changing rapidly. It's mostly medieval stuff because I'm really into that and strategy. I'm always open to suggestions, and for now I'm doing Battle Brothers experiments. So if you're interested about how to fuck up every single campaign, you can. Bosco the First is your guy.
I would give Bosco a little shout out. He's got some very interesting series there. There's a Berserker playthrough where you had everybody using no armor and two-handed weapons. Is that right?
Just axes, any type of axes when possible. It was a disaster.
That sounds like it would be because axes have their drawbacks. Okay, and last but not least, myself, Brendan Stobbart. On Twitter, I'm at Brendan Stobbart. YouTube is /Stobbie149, and on twitch.tv it's Stobbie149 as well. I stream primarily XCOM. I'm on a bit of an XCOM hiatus because Long War 2 broke my soul. Shit is difficult, yo. And now I'm just really, really enjoying Battle Brothers. So yeah, if you guys want to check us out, come see us on Twitch. Please give any suggestions or questions to us, and we'll be sure to cover them in the next podcast. Thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you guys in a week or two. That's the Brothers podcast. Cheers.
Cheers.